of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority Board to order. Take the roll, please.
Mr. Vaniel?
Here.
Mrs. Sherling? Here. Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Dr. Mahoney?
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn? Mr. Grinberg? Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Whalen? Ms. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Otto? Here. Mr. Hendrickson?
Here.
Mr. Thorsted? Here. Mr. Olson?
Okay, item number 2, minutes, last meeting.
Move to approve.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Order of agenda, I'd like to add 2 items. The first one being update from our meeting this morning, the mayors and I with the DNR. I'll ask Mayor Mahoney and Mayor Williams to comment on that following this revision to the order of agenda. So that would be 3A, if you will. And then the second item that I have I'd like to add is some discussion on executive director, permanent executive director, and we'll do that under item 8, other business.
I'd move approval with those additions. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I'll turn it over to the mayors here for an update on our meeting with the Tom Landwehr and Barb Naramore.
As some of you may or may not know, we've been having a number of discussions with Minnesota Governor's Office and particularly Commissioner Landwehr's office, which is our Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and a fair amount of letters back and forth. And so at one point we decided that it was time to quit letter writing, and it was a good time for us to have sort of a face-to-face. And so the decision was to meet together, Tim, Daryl, and I, with Commissioner Landwehr and Barb Naramore, who is Assistant Commissioner. And so we did that this morning. We basically went to make sure that, just to talk, to make sure that we can continuing talking, and if we did, what kinds of processes we might do. And so I think we had a really good conversation. It was very, first of all, definitely respectful, and as I would have thought, it wouldn't have been any other way. The commissioner seemed to, validated that permanent flood protection is also very important. We talked about the concept of what Plan B may or may not be. It's a lot more flexible than you would think, but it also includes some things that we would like to see. And so we decided that it made sense to have a technical working group for one that would include, I suppose, primarily engineers from both sides of the state getting together, looking at the things that have gone before and looking to see if they make sense, if there's things that could be done or not done. And to start with the tough questions first, is this a workable thing that Minnesota can buy into? And along with that would probably need a, what do we call that? Agreement of on admissibility, just so because there's always the potential of lawsuits on both sides and what could phase a lawsuit. So this would be something that would allow us to have very open, honest, transparent discussions without having fear of messing up anybody's ability to use it in a lawsuit in one way or the other. And so I think that was one component of it. And then secondarily, we saw that there would be a need for a policy group. And we didn't go into much detail about what that would entail. Obviously, both sides of the group, so it was also involve groups that we've tried to get to the table but haven't been able to. and maybe even involving intermediary group that might bring them together. And so that needed a little bit more fleshing out, but to start off, we wanted to make sure that we could get a working group of our technical expertise to make sure that they start the conversations up. Tim, you want to add to that?
And I think you reflected it very well. The real positive thing that came out of there is we have a path going forward. So that there's a dialogue, there's going to be the groups coming together, and it was good for them to know what they'd like to go forward. I think we identified 2 areas you got to look at, is that's the engineering part and then that's the policy part, and how to become compliant with Minnesota law. What do we have to do, or what are the things that they'd like us to do? But I think their hope is that we could come together and work through those processes. So I took it as a positive meeting, and let's try to see what we can do together, bring more people together to talk. And part of what the message was to us is the DNR really wasn't part of a lot of the stuff early on, so they really didn't have a lot of say in that early part. So they're in their mind in some ways is doing catch-up now, trying to state what the people would like or what was going on. But the possibility of going forward with the discussion was excellent. So I think it'll be good.
Thank you, both, for the update. I really felt there was, if you go into a meeting, maybe with lowering your expectations, then you can come out of a meeting feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, true.
And maybe that was part of it, but we really did talk a lot about a number of things, but I don't think we need to go into detail on those here. The takeaway was that they were agreeable to structure some type of a work group and continue some communications with regard to the finding of fact document, and that's positive. Now, it doesn't mean that things could change and they're only one body or agency, and so it's at this point it was very positive. So thank you and both, and we certainly did have a very cordial, as cordial and productive as what Barb more indicated, meeting. So management, Randy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Just an overview of last month's accomplishments. I know I mentioned the voters approved the sales tax extension last time, and I just thought it was worth mentioning again, so there it is.
You can mention that all year. I don't mind at all.
One of the big milestones on the program, of course, are the permits that we have to receive from various agencies, and we've received the Core 404 permit, and John Shockley is going to talk a bit more in detail about that after I'm finished here. Continuing developing the P3 RFP documents in November. We've drafted the 2017 budget and have vetted that through the Finance Committee. You'll hear a proposal later in today's meeting for the full board to accept the 2017 annual budget. Phase 1 land acquisitions continue, and I'm hoping about this time next year I will tell you that Phase 1 land acquisitions are complete. We're continuing, although winding down our in-town construction for the year. We have advertised the next Oxbow home demolition package, so we'll be working on that and receiving bids here in the next week or so. And as we've talked about, we're continuing our outreach with the state of Minnesota, which has led to the adoption of perhaps a working group or two with the Minnesota DNR, one of our priority areas coming up in December. In December, we'll also be preparing for the 2017 legislative season, both here over in Minnesota and in Washington, D.C. Next board meeting on the 15th will also be coming to you and asking for your approval to release the P3 RFP documents. That'll obviously a very big milestone in the P3 approach as well as the program overall. We'll be still working on land acquisitions this coming month and wrapping up in-town construction for the season. So, Ty, if you would, construction update.
Good afternoon. A much shortened construction update this time. Everyone is aware of the 2nd Street ribbon cutting that took place a couple weeks back. That, of course, was on, I think, the 22nd, which was one day ahead of what we had originally scheduled. Very nice time. It was a little bit cold, but that was a good day. 42 A1A3, the 4th Street Pump Station, the bike path to the river, and actually not the final portion of flood wall. I didn't realize there's about 12 feet of flood wall yet to go this year. But for the most part, that everything on the wet side of the levee was completed up for the construction season. The generator building concrete is also not quite complete. It's nearly complete. I forgot that there is a placement taking place tomorrow and this weekend. We are expecting the contractor to continue that generator building structure through the winter. That'll be the only project other than demo that will be moving ahead over the winter time. And then work package 42F2, which is the levee on the former Park East Apartment site. All major work for the season is now complete, and we have the substantial completion inspection scheduled for next week. There will be some occasional activity going on over the winter, though. It's not really directly project related, but all of the unsuitable material in the levee inspection trench that had been taken out throughout the course of the project will be exported as the weather allows. So the contractor's going to wait for a little bit of freeze, just because the site will end up turning into a mud pit if they start doing that now. So that's not an urgent matter. That project is going to not close out until next summer anyway, after the grass grows. And so that'll be wrapping up over the winter and spring. And then one final note before I step down is we do have one other activity going on, and that's demolition in Oxbow, or outside of Oxbow rather. There is a current demo project for 2 homes. These were opportunistic buys. The owners have long since left, and we're just taking down the homes at this point. The one home on the north side of Oxbow is already down. The one on the south side of Oxbow, they started demolition yesterday. It's probably down today. I don't know that for sure. And then as soon as the weather allows and the ground freezes a little bit, then they'll start backfilling those excavations. And there is one more Oxbow demo that's out for bid right now. That's an 11-home package. The site visit and pre-bid meeting was on Tuesday. Bids are due on that one, I think it's December 13th. And so that'll be another activity that takes place over the winter. Any questions for me on construction activities? Thank you very much.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That one. Just. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Diversion Authority. I have one action item today, along with some information. I wanted to provide a brief overview for the Diversion Authority Board of the P3 activities in 2017. As you'll later see in the budget section, there are quite a few activities that are identified from an administrative and legal and procurement standpoint for the P3 activities in 2017. So I thought it would provide a better perspective of what type of activities we would envision occurring in 2017. Seem to be having technical problems there. A little bit of a refresher. On October 13th of this year, the board, as you may recall, shortlisted 4 proposers for the P3 element, which is the diversion channel and the associated infrastructure. The 4 teams are Lake Agassiz Partners, Red River Valley Partners, Red River Valley Alliance, and Red River Partners. As you can see, Red River being in 3 of their names, we use their equity names for identification purposes. The approval of the request for proposals, as Randy indicated, is set for your December 15th meeting. the proposed recommendation for that, the process to recommend release of the RFP is as follows. On December 14th, we'll be asking the Finance Committee to recommend approval of the RFP and release. On the morning of December 15th, we'll be asking the Cass County Joint Water Resource District to approve the RFP and its issuance. Just as a little bit of a refresher, we require their concurrence because of the special assessment district. Then on December 15th, this board will be asked to approve the RFP and issue it to the 4 shortlisted bidders. We would envision that on December 16th, the actual document would be released. The actual document probably has close to 400 or 500 pages, so it's quite a substantial document. The contents of the RFP is a slight refresher. The major component is the technical requirements. These establish the technical performance standards for the bidders. The ITP, which is the instructions to the proposer. These are the instructions that really guide the procurement procedures and then how they will be required to prepare both their technical and their financial proposal. The PA, which is known as the project agreement, is the draft contract between the Diversion Authority and the successful proposer. There'll be several supporting materials that you as a board won't necessarily see, but they're part of the data room. They include geotechnical reports, additional work that's been done, and reports made by the Army Corps of Engineers. There will be included with it appropriations and financing white paper. You'll actually see that specific document at the next meeting. Moving into 2017, in general, the P3 RFP process has a period of time in which you have informal meetings with each of the 4 shortlisted teams to refine the technical requirements, refine the ITP, refine the elements of the project agreement, leading up to a final date at which the RFP is bid against by each of the teams. We're envisioning during the week of February 13th through the 16th that we would have our first round of informal meetings with each of the bidders. And then there'll be additional one-on-one informal meetings in April, May, and June. We would envision that the scope of those meetings would probably be reduced as we get to the 4th meeting when the issues are largely resolved. The final RFP is the document they actually bid against. That'll be released on July 14th. There will be no additional changes to the RFP, the technical requirements after that time. On August 24th, the technical proposals will be due from each of the shortlisted proposers. Following the receipt of the technical proposals, the evaluation team, which once again is the local engineers from each of the member entities, will perform a technical review and evaluation to determine whether or not the technical proposal is consistent with the technical requirements. The financial proposals, which as a board you're probably more interested in knowing how much is this all going to cost, that will be due on September 21st of 2017. Following receipt of the financial proposals, the financial team, Kent Costin, Mike Monplaisir, Brian Berg, etc., supported by Ernst & Young, myself, Asher, CH2M, will perform a review and evaluation of those financial proposals and submit a recommendation to the co-deputy executive directors for a report back to this board. That report would come from the 2 co-executive directors to the Finance Committee, the Cass County Joint Board, and the Diversion Authority Board. On October 12th, we would envision that the Diversion Authority would select the preferred proposer. That would be the team that will actually construct the diversion channel and the related infrastructure. The preferred proposer at that point in time would be required to submit a security that would stay in place until financial close. That is to avoid having the successful proposer withdraw at the last minute. From the Diversion Authority standpoint, we've invested a lot of time and effort in the procurement. Once we reach a successful proposer, we do not want to lose that successful proposer, so the bid security will be quite significant. We'd envision that in December of next year, we'll have commercial close, and in March 1st of 2018, a financial close, and sometime shortly thereafter, a notice to proceed. There is a split between commercial and financial close. The commercial close is the signing of the project agreement, the other related technical documents. The financial close is when all the banks and the appropriate financing reach close. And it's a split close just to enable the banks and the financial institutions to finish up their work. I would be happy to answer any questions about the procurement process in the 2017, but I thought it'd be helpful for the board to get a brief overview of activities for next year related to the P3.
Any questions on that for John? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only action item I have on the agenda is directly related to the diversion channel and associated infrastructure. I'm pleased to present the board that we have received our 404 permit from the Corps. We would need board action to approve the permit, and this doesn't start any construction on the channel. Obviously, this is just approval of the permit. I would note that we are going through a few minor revisions to the permit that are non-substantive. The P3 process is relatively new for the Corps, and in a lot of permitting situations, they have full design plans and specs when they issue a 404 permit. In this case, we're asking the developer to design the plans and specs in an innovative process starting next year. So the permit language is being adapted to allow plans and specs to be approved into the process and approved as we proceed with the project. So I had put a suggested motion in the agenda. I would ask that that motion be slightly amended to say to authorize the chair and executive director to sign the permit in substantially the same form, because there will be a few minor changes probably within the next 24 to 48 hours.
I'd open it up for questions if anyone has any with regard to the 404 permit. And also note that, as John indicated, the suggested motion should read chair and executive director. Right? Directors.
I would move the motion.
We have a motion for the suggested,
Second.
and a second, Mary. Again, any comments or question? I would also
do.
note that in our, was there one?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just make a note that we did, in our conversation with the DNR, inform them of this action that we were taking place. They thanked us for notifying them. And Tom Landwehr indicated that he realizes there's a lot of moving parts and that this is not a simple thing to achieve. And so it didn't raise any big alarms. Mayor?
Not that we would do this, but I was wondering what would happen if we voted it down.
You wouldn't have a permit if you voted it down. Yeah, we have to approve it as the entity. And this is only for construction of the channel entirely within North Dakota. It's essentially related to the P3 element. It is a important decision in the P3 process so that we can provide assurance to the bidders that we have a project that has received the appropriate permitting from the Corps of Engineers.
Any other comments, questions? If not, take the roll.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes?
Mrs. Sherling? Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney? Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Otto? Yes. Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Thorstvedt? Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We don't have item number 6, nothing to report there, so number 7, Mike, Finance.
Good afternoon. Finance met yesterday, and we had a lot of discussion concerning our budget for next year, and we eventually passed a motion to approve it. Total budget of $241,311,231. And Robert is going to go over it, I think. So you can ask your questions of Robert.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Mike mentioned, we provided review on the FY 2016 budget. So we have a copy of the top-level budget is attached with your package, as well as an overall summary of the overall budget with the individual components in there. I have a slide presentation, just kind of go over some of the highlights for the individual categories. If anyone has questions, just please let me know. So the first portion of that is with the diversion channel. So there's P3 procurement cost associated with the work that John had mentioned is coming up this next year. Part of those costs also include utility relocation that we want to have done prior to the P3 contractor. Also, in the southern embankment, there's also a small nominal budget item for additional support if needed for the contractor, or for the Corps of Engineers, but we don't anticipate any additional local share payments for next year. Also contained in the budget, other mitigation projects, predominantly in the Oxbow-Hickson area, which is the housing demolition that was mentioned in the construction update, as well as, if the injunction is listed, resuming some of the Oxbow-Hickson projects. For in-town work, we have the complimentary in-town flood protection that's managed by the city of Fargo, along with some completion of the in-town levy work, as well as any retained payments and the start of landscaping area along the finished components. Additionally, under the enabling works, the County Road 16 and 17 bridge as well. For land acquisition, you see in the budget about $100 million for land acquisition along the channel, upstream staging area, some opportunistic buys, as well as the completion of the Oxbow-Hicks purchases, and then any remaining work done in the in-town levies. For engineering and design fees, any of the engineering design associated with the other construction work that's coming up, so there's some other mitigation projects, anything related to the in-town levies, the enabling works, which is the County Road 16 and 17 bridge, also any of the utility designs for utility relocations, permitting support, as we've noted, the Minnesota DNR and others have made some allowances there if there's any additional costs associated with those coming up for 17. And then any additional modeling support in support of the P3 procurement or the Corps of Engineers. Program management services, so we have allowances for the overall strategy and development, along with our normal reporting cost schedule, any technical management support, financial, legal, and also the government community outreach allocations. We've also allowed for contingency this year, budgeted for the various projects. We have some allowance for any kind of types of contingency that may come up. Other program-related items, debt service as well on the bonds and various interests to finance the overall program. And also, as we have projects completed, there will be associated maintenance costs that we're providing an allowance for as well for 2017. That's all I have for the budget update. If anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yes, Chuck?
Thank you. And it says fiscal year 2017, it says proposed FY17 budget assumes the following will occur in quarter 1 or quarter 2. And the second bullet point says the preliminary injunction for construction of the OHB ring levy will be lifted. Under what assumption was that derived from?
As far as overall assumption,
Yeah.
I couldn't answer that as far as the legal.
Well, it's an assumption that we made in order to allocate an appropriate amount of cash for the coming year. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the injunction, but we want to make sure that in order to give Mr. Costin enough forward look about what we think cash is going to be expended for, we've made that assumption in order to make sure we're not short cash if in fact the injunction is lifted. But we're not making any prediction about that.
So it's just a forecast?
Yes, it is.
For budget, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
So,
Randy?
Mr. Chairman, As Mr. Montplaisir indicated, the Finance Committee has recommended to the board that this $241 million budget be approved for 2017, and I would ask that the board consider that motion now.
I have a question there, Randy and Mike. Sitting in the Finance Committee meeting, and I may be wrong, totally wrong on this, but I thought that the recommendation was going to forward this budget to the board, and that we were going to send this out to the entities for, they have a right to question, and then that we would handle the final approval, or the approval of the budget on 15th. Am I wrong in that? We're going to approve it here and then send it out? Approve it here and then send it out? Okay, then I was wrong on that, so, okay. And by the way, for members of the board and for those of us that sat through several budget meetings, the drill downs that are behind this are extensive. You know, it seems rather simplistic here on a one-pager, but there, and anyone can certainly ask about them, but it goes many different levels here in terms of the detailedness to whatever extent that you would want. So I want to make that known that I thought that Rob has done an excellent job in putting all of this together and has gone through several iterations of this, so.
That's true, and I think that's important. We have asked Robert to supply Kent and I with the actual spreadsheet so that we can kind of look back behind the scenes and see exactly what's happening all year long. It's just an easier way of looking at things. We think the current format that we've got before you today is nice and clean and easy to follow.
Okay, questions? If not,
Chairman.
go ahead,
Yeah,
Kevin.
my question is then regarding the program management on the 17.2. And I know that it pertains to an awful lot of different things, including legal. And I'm curious as to how that number for 17 compares to the 2016 budget number that we had for that same item, for those same items.
So for 2017, we do have some additional legal fees in there as well, to allowances for any injunctions or any additional legal fees that are out there. Also support as we get more into the P3 contract itself, so we have an increase in the overall program management fees.
I was hoping that was the answer.
Yeah, okay.
Thank
Other
Thank you.
questions? Go ahead. Kevin, anything else? We would then entertain a motion to approve the 2017 budget.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can I make one?
Yeah.
Again, when it goes back to our entities, when we did this final, when we created this new authority, the whole budget process determines in regards to who pays what, that's already defined, right? So we, as it goes back to the entities, we don't need to relive who's paying what.
Yes,
I
and
just wanted to clarify that.
John, and correct me if I'm wrong too, but it goes back to the entities so that they can review and ask questions. It's something that does not require formal approval from each entity. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's for informational purposes only. And just to confirm, the specific cost breakouts and the revenue sources are all defined in the joint powers agreement.
And I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, the fact that it will go to each of the entities, and I would hope that that maybe we can have somebody, and maybe I'm looking to Brian and to Mike from our side of the river, that can maybe give a little bit more detail of this budget, or be able to answer any questions that our boards may have in terms of, so when it comes to the Clay County Board, I might not be able to get into the specifics of the budget that somebody else may ask. And so it would be nice to have somebody at present when we do those.
Is that something, Randy, or someone that, might go if asked, and maybe bring the more detailed ones in case,
Absolutely.
So I guess I would leave that up to each entity,
Yeah.
Cass County and Choice
Thank you,
Water
Mr.
Board and all that, so. To try and coordinate that then through Randy, we'll do that. Did we have a motion? No? Question first.
No, motion.
Motion, okay.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the 2017 budget.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Nancy. There's nothing further. Take the roll, please.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling? Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes?
Ms. Otto? Yes. Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted? Mr. Olson?
Yes.
One of the other items I skipped over was a contracting action that we also approved yesterday, a change order in the amount of $2,386. And I think Robert is going to explain that?
Also, just like to note that with the new resolution that was passed recently, there were some amendments to H&G contracts as noted. They were just informational that we're just reporting out, so there's really no action for the board. For the construction change order amount, the $2,386, that was for the Pump Street. There was some reprogramming of some displays to allow for operational consistency across for the city for the various pump stations they have, in addition to adding a drain to the exterior generator pad that was associated with that. So, okay.
Okay, any questions on that?
Move to approve.
We have a motion approved. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Questions? Please take the roll.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes?
Mrs. Sherling? Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes?
Ms. Otto? Yes. Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted? Mr. Olson?
Yes.
And the last item is the approval of vouchers, a total of $76,467.19, all for legal fees. Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? Roll, please.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling? Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes?
Ms. Otto? Yes. Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted? Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next item, the executive director. From time to time, we brought this up. Different people have questioned, are we ready, or where are we at with an executive director? I think the last time it came up was several months ago, and I think at that time, John gave some commentary about the things that are happening in 2017. And maybe you might, if you recall, if you might repeat that, and then I'll just kind of,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments a few months ago were to the effect that there's two really classes of executive directors that you would be looking for. The executive director that would help you through the negotiations period of the P3, and to be frank, at this point in time, we're so far matured into the P3 process that it would not be economically feasible for the Diversion Authority to hire somebody to manage that process. You would spend an awful lot of money, and you would be so far advanced in the process, it just would not be worthwhile. So at that time, recommended waiting until after we knew about the sales tax vote, which has been successful, and really the second part of the executive director's role is what I would call contract implementation, and with the P3 procurement on track for a commercial close in late 2017, it would be a good it is a good time to start in the first quarter, to start the first quarter of 2017, to start the process of looking for the executive director who can help you with that contract implementation. Because that's a skill that there'll be 6 years of contract construction to implement and undertake. Whereas with the negotiation part, you might have an executive director with a different skill set only there for a few months. And so from a practical standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to start looking for that executive director that has the technical skills to execute a P3 agreement and see the construction through. And from a timing perspective, if you start looking in early 2017 with a goal to hire mid-year, because I would suspect it'll take some time to find the right candidate with the right qualifications. That'll give that individual 2 to 3 months to really familiarize themselves with the project agreement, the technical requirements, and the teams that would likely be selected. So it would be a really good opportunity to bring that person in, have them learn about the process, understand it, so when you reach commercial close and financial close, they're ready on day one to fully implement that contract.
Thank you. I've had this conversation with Mike Redlinger, and so, Mike, if you have any comments, you're free to make them on your own, but the conversation that, from my perspective, is, I guess both of us have certainly served in a role in a very short time, Mike more certainly than I, but in attending a number of meetings in that capacity or as interim administrator, my eyes are open to a lot more than they were before. I can assure you that. Whether it's the TAG meetings or any other meetings that we have, there's a lot of commitment of time, and whether it's the city of Fargo in Mike's time or Cass County, that's a huge drain on those resources. It's not that the administrators still wouldn't go to a number of meetings, but I can tell you that with the structure we have here for whether it's change orders or anything else, Mike and I don't walk side by shoulder to shoulder here, and so we're at different meetings or different places. It's a little bit cumbersome. It's work, and I think that the JPA that we put together would address so many good things, and the way it was structured for the co-executive directors was certainly a very positive thing. But I really think the time has come. We're entering into a phase here that is going to be pretty rapid-paced, and I really feel strongly that we should start the process sooner than later. John talked about first quarter. I would like to see even some work on a job description start sooner than first quarter. I would like it starting in December, so that we're getting, because our meetings here to then approve what's put together and all that is still going to lead us. This is not going to be a quick and easy type of a thing. And I believe that it's no different than an administrator who handles a major project for 6 months and moves on to another project for 6 months that's totally different. So, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, John, the fact that there was thought to be a different focus for a while than another focus, but that's what we all live through in any role. So I'm open to discussion. First of all, I'd ask Mike if you have any comments on it. Okay. But any thoughts? Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your comments, and I think the burden that we put on those people as this being a job in addition to their regular duties is asking an awful lot. And I thank Darrell, you, and I thank Mike for the work you've done. And I want to give an example to somebody else who's been doing an awful lot of work in this P3, and that's Brian Berg from our county. And to have them continue to take that amount of time away from what is their normal important duties is not right. And I think you're exactly right on that. We need to move this forward sooner rather than later, because the jobs that they do already have significant importance, not even having this job added to it. So I fully support, and I agree with you that we should do this sooner rather than later.
Any other? Mary?
Thank you. Yes, I would concur. I believe, I've heard it, the number of 60 to 70% of the time of the Cass County Administrator is spent on diversion-related activities. And although I expect that there will certainly always be some amount of time spent on that, when you consider how rapidly Cass County is growing and will continue to grow in the future, I just think it's important now especially that we get moving on this and get somebody in place.
I think just looking over the budget, when we just looked over this, or we used to spend 32 million one year, or 70 the other year. Now we're up to 224 million, 237 million. We're going to be in the 300, 400 million clips now. And just watching when I went from Grub to Mike, just the amount of work both of them are doing in that. It's hard to do your other duties plus do all the diversion work. So I guess I'd like to make a motion. We look into doing executive director, if I may.
Second.
Okay. The comment then here with this motion is that we move this forward. John, previously, I think you and I believe maybe Martin were kind of tasked with job description. Is that correct, or Martin?
Yes, we were working with the county administrator at that time to work on the job description. We'll finalize that job description with, I think it helps from our drafting standpoint now that we have the sales tax vote successful and that we're really moving into the phase of project implementation. And so what I would propose is we'll try to finalize that initial draft, meet with the co-executive directors with the goal of bringing that draft job description back to this board.
And I'm not opposed to Mike being part of that, and even Brian, from the perspective of you guys being administrators, and you could assist greatly if you would be so inclined to start the process where we can tweak and add and change things as we go forward. But I think what we're task at hand is start the job description.
Bring all the smart administrators, John. I guess that's all.
Okay, so we're all clear then that that's kind of where we're headed. So I guess I would just ask everyone's okay with that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Anything else to come before us? Okay, next meeting, December 15th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion and a second by Kevin.
Second.
And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.